1, 0. Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. Oh, it's a cold morning here in Ireland, in Cork, Ireland. Jeez, but today, you know what guys, I'm going to get straight into it. Today I want to talk about Ayrton Senna, the greatest F1 driver the world has ever seen. Now, he is my hero. He's my god. Okay, and for those of you who actually now are into Formula One Drive to Survive now, because I know that actually ladies out there, even the ladies here, I think you guys will actually like this episode because it's unbelievable what I'm seeing right now. That, like, I even know one of my friends now, and he's married to a girl. She never liked Formula One, ever, okay, until Formula One Drive to Survive came out. And all of a sudden, she is obsessed with Formula One. She's seen every episode of Drive to Survive. She watches the F1 live races every weekend, which is just, guys, like, that's unbelievable. And many of you know I'm an ex-racing driver, and for me to hear that women are now watching Formula One it's unbelievable. Like, I mean, it's ridiculous, you know? It's like a man, well, I don't know, watching ballet, you know, all of a sudden, and he's going to the to see live performances of ballet, and I mean, it's that insane to an ex-racing driver, you know, which is great. Typical me now. Do you know what? I just started a podcast, and what did I do? I have my bloody alarms turned on. Sorry, guys. Okay, I'm turning off my alarms on my phone. Oh, I can be such an idiot sometimes. Okay, so anyway, so guys, yeah, and I think, look, hopefully this is going to be informational to you because, like, many of you know, I've been a racing driver, and like, I started when I was 10, and I started in karts. Now, guys, for a lot of you out there, a lot of you will call it go-karts. It's not go-karts, it's karts. You're probably going, what the hell's he on about? But it's just one of the, and maybe it's a pet peeve, but go-karts are actually wooden carts that you got two pedals made out of fucking bean cans, you know, whereas an actual kart is a kart. So if you ever hear somebody saying go-kart, chances are they don't know much about racing. And I'm not being insulting to anybody here, but I'm just giving you the actual facts here, all right? So I started in karts, won multiple Irish championships, and as I was going up, Ayrton Senna was my hero. And it wasn't favoritism. You just saw what the guy could do in a fucking car was just out of this world. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit more. But then I progressed into cars, and then I really, truly appreciated his gift to this world. That man, what that man could do in a racing car, there is no words to describe what that man could do. And I'm going to talk about his best race the world's ever seen and why it was so important to this world. And this isn't about even racing, guys. This is about not giving up in certain situations, whether you're a plumber, a racing driver, a rugby player, a football player, an accountant, you know, whatever it is. This guy just is the textbook of you never, ever give up. And Senna, he was a 3-time world champion. No doubt, he like, when this guy spoke, it was like listening to a poet recite his poetry that he's created. I mean, he was a poet. He was a sensitive, vulnerable, fragile man. And he was also a monster when he got into a racing car. That man would take you off the track. If somebody was right behind him and they were about to pass him, he would let you decide, do you want to have an accident with him, right? So some people called him crazy. I wouldn't call him crazy. He was borderline, right? A little bit borderline crazy. Now, I mean, by the way, this is my hero. So, like, guys, I'm not being biased towards my hero. There was a little bit of a madness to him. And I think that actually gave him that little bit of edge. Now, to be a race driver, you don't need to be mad, okay? You don't. Because I can tell you this, guys, and believe you me, right? I know racing drivers. And even though we are risking our lives, I can tell you for a fact, for every single racing driver out there, we want to be safe at the end of the day. Okay? You know, we're strapping ourselves in. We've got belts that we strap around our legs, almost up to our private parts, right? Squeezing our private parts. And believe you me, we are huge, what would you call it? Well, we're hugely in favor of being safe, right? So we're not mad. We're adrenaline junkies, no doubt about it. But it's funny though, when you do start racing, you don't think of it as an adrenaline rush, right? Because you're getting down to business. Because racing is a business. And you have to treat it like a serious thing. So it's not just, pure adrenaline rush junkie. And no, you're focusing on setting up the car right, developing the car right, getting to the top, qualifying, getting onto pole position, winning the race. I mean, there's a lot to it. So like with Senna, there's no doubt there's two parts of a race driver that you'd look at. You've got the qualifier and the racer. Ayrton Senna in qualifying. Now, I've no doubt a lot of you know that in qualifying you go out and you do the best lap. Whoever gets the best lap gets pole position, right? So whoever's fastest, bang, they start at the front. So Ayrton Senna, I think, now I'd have to double check it actually. I should have even just checked that stat, but I think he's got 61 pole positions as far as I remember. But he was God. The man was just God when he got into a qualifying session. He was always the last guy on the track. Now, many of you might not know, or you may know this, guys, that when you're in qualifying, and I've no doubt a lot of you have seen where, the countdown, the timer is going down, right? So when it gets to 0, the qualifying's over. Now, the best possible scenario a racing driver can have when he's in qualifying, right, is that at 1 second to go before the checkered flag drops and the qualifying is over, you pass the line because you've got 1 lap to go. So the closest you get to the finishing time, okay, that means you've got 1 more lap to go. And this is a real, this is a fucking fine art to get this proper, right? And because the point is this though, if you're last across the line, right? In other words, let's say, and now again, by the way, most people don't get to 1 second because that's a really fucking hard time to get that close to the finishing line, because when the clock gets to 0, if you have not passed the start line, the checkered flag drops and the qualifying's over. But if you get over that qualifying the start line, just a couple of seconds to go before it finishes, you've got 1 lap to go because it's not over, right? So the target is to be the last guy over the line just before the checkered flag drops to finish qualifying. Therefore, you've got 1 more lap to go. Now, why is this important? This is important for huge number 1 factor. A lot of tire rubber gets put down on the track. So the more cars drive on the track, the more rubber gets laid out and spread on the racing line. The more rubber that's on the racing line, the more grip you have. And technically, the car is going to go faster, right? Now, guys, I mean, when we're talking qualifying, we're talking this can be 0.2 of a lap, even 1/10. Now, guys, if you timed 1/10 or 0.2 on your let's say your phone, your stopwatch, that it looks nothing to you. Now, to be honest and to be fair, if I was not a racing driver, I'd be thinking the same thing of it's nothing. It's not even a second. It's not even 10% of a second, or whatever it is, right? But it's everything when you get to the top levels of racing. 1/10 can be and by the way, guys, I'm being really serious. 1/10 can be a fucking lifetime of time. 0.2 could actually make your heart sink to the bottom of your stomach, right? And you could actually be devastated with 0.2 of a second. That I wouldn't go this far, but you could actually lose confidence in that race weekend, because 0.2 could be. It's frightening how much 0.2 can be, because again, racing can be so competitive, especially in the qualifying sessions. So Ayrton Senna was the best ever at being the last guy across the line. All the time. He was God. Now, that is a skill in itself. But even he was so good that even if he wasn't the last guy across the line, he'd still put the fucking thing on pole anyway most of the time. I mean, his batting average for qualifying, I'd have to look it up, but I think as far as I remember, it's 1 out of 2 or 1 out of 3. So in other words, 50% of the time, he's going to be on pole position, which is our 33%, which is fucking, it just doesn't happen, guys. Back in his day, it does not happen. Now, these days, with the Hamiltons and Verstappens of the world, right? Their cars are so automated now. I mean, you could literally just step into the car and just press a button and the car will go around the track for you. Now, that's not happening. They do have some fail-safes, no question, right? No question. Now, I'll put it this way to you. In 1995, when I was racing, I'll never forget it. In Brands Hatch in England, they brought out, and as far as I remember, it was David Coulthard's McLaren, or it was either Williams. I'd have to double check, but it was David Coulthard's F1 car anyway. He was in Brands Hatch in England. Now, that's not a Formula 1 track, but it was a Formula 1 track back in the days of the 70s and 80s, Jackie Stewart and guys like that. But back in the day, in 1995, they actually did a test in Brands Hatch. They had, this is God's honest truth, guys, they had no driver in the car, and they had the car drive around the track, changing gears, up, down gears, all that, steering wheel, everything, as in like an actual driver was in the car. And that's in 1995, guys, where they could actually drive a car automatically around a fucking track, Brands Hatch in England, without a fucking driver in the car. Now, was that technology out before 95? I actually have no idea. I don't know. But I know this happened. And again, look, maybe it's behind the scenes, and if you're behind the scenes, people who are in F1 or they're not in F1, or it's a bit of a close community. It's a small community, so to speak. So if you go back to 1995 and you see that sort of thing going on, imagine what they can do in 2022, 23, 21, 20. Now, I mean, we're in the 23 season now, and we're in January, so we haven't kicked off yet, but imagine what they could have done 10 years ago. Now, look, guys, I'm not here, by the way, saying that they're all just sitting there and it's like a roller coaster just taking a ride around the track. No. The Verstappens and Hamiltons, the Alonsos, they all have to still drive the car anyway, right? They definitely have some fail-safes. For instance, they've got 8 gears in the car, right? Again, this is the difference between Senna's era and the era now. Now they've got 8 gears, right? Now you think, Jesus, how do they focus? And okay, how do they know what gear to go into this corner? Like, there's no doubt about it. A racing driver will make a mistake, right? They'll go the wrong gear, just that fraction of a second of brain fart, and instead of being in 3rd gear for a corner, they're in 4th gear, right? So in other words, or maybe let's say they have to go into 2nd gear. So they do have one fail-safe where, if they're going into a 2nd gear corner, they're going from 8th down to 2nd. Let's say the driver has that little tiny lapse of concentration. He might go to 3rd instead of 2nd. So what happens, 2nd instead of 3rd, let's say. Okay? What happens is when he's going down the gears, the system knows that the corner is 2nd gear, let's say, and the driver should be bringing it down to 2nd. So if he goes into third, the car will automatically go down into second for him, right? And by the way, that might sound like it's kind of cheating, and it's not cheating, guys, because you know what? Hey, fuck it. It's a good thing to have as an engineer, as a team, to have that fail-safe in. Why wouldn't you have it, right? Now, it does take away from the driver's point of view. Yes, no question. But it's still a great system to have, a feature to have as a team. So you've got these kind of fail-safes where the car knows, the technology knows that he needs to be in this gear. So even if he selects the wrong gear, the car knows and it'll automatically correct for you. Okay? So, I mean, as a racing driver, I would hate that. I would absolutely hate that. And I've no doubt in my mind, the Hamiltons, the Verstappens, the Alonsos, whoever you want to call it these days, they don't like it either. They don't. Because we like the old school, the tough. We like to grind it out, tough it out, So, like, my point is that Ayrton Senna would never have had this back in the day. Ever. Right? He was a manual gearbox, by the way, guys. As you know, a lot of the Formula 1 drivers these days, they've got the paddle shifts on the back of the steering wheel, which are actually, they're really cool in fairness. But they're not what Ayrton Senna had back in the day. He had, the 5 or 6 gears, or 4, depending, and H-box, standard manual H-box, like your car would, and these guys had to tough this shit out, right? I mean, crazy stuff. And, I mean, there's one, by the way, guys, you should see YouTube and look up Ayrton Senna Monaco qualifying lap, one-handed. He comes out of the Lowe's hairpin in Monaco in qualifying, and he's in second gear, and he comes out, obviously puts the shoe down, accelerates out of the bend, and he gets a bit of wheel spin. So he's doing a little bit of opposite lock where you correct the wheel spin, right? And he's doing it one fucking handed. And yeah, drivers can do that, but it just showed the commitment that man had to his whole lap. Because Monaco's a tight track, Armco barriers everywhere. One tiny mistake and you're fucked. You're in the wall. And Senna could have gone into the wall coming out of that corner. But he just put the fucking shoe down, full commitment. It was either everything or nothing. And guys, honestly, you should definitely YouTube this. Ayrton Senna, Monaco qualifying, one-handed. I hope it does give you some appreciation of what these guys can do. I mean, unbelievable. And again, a H-box, manual gearbox. Unreal. The greatest race in terms of not entertainment, but in terms of, and again, guys, like I was saying about never giving up, and this can apply to an accountant, a plumber, a racing driver, a rugby player, football player. Inspirational. The greatest inspirational moment I've ever seen in my life was Senna in Brazil at his home track in Interlagos. And he was in the lead, and he got stuck in 6th gear. Oh, sorry, beg your pardon. It was either 5th or 6th gear. Actually, I think it was 5th gear. You might have to look that up. But he was stuck in one of the high gears. Now, guys, there's a couple of tight corners in Interlagos, Brazil, right? 2nd gear bends, 3rd gear bends. And this man got stuck in 5th gear or the 6th gear for, I would think, majority of the race, right? Probably about 3/4 of the race. Maybe half, right? But whatever it was. And it was definitely towards the end. Now, the guys behind were catching, but he had enough momentum and pace in him to keep going. And his shoulders were fucked because he was trying to keep the momentum up. I think he had a problem, don't quote me on this, but I think he had a problem with his steering column as well, where it was actually, I think it lost a bit of power in it, really, whereas, in other words, the steering column felt like 100 tons to steer, right? Kind of like losing your power steering in your car. Okay, that kind of feel about it. But that man I have never seen a man so exhausted after a race like Ayrton Senna did in Interlagos back in that day. And when he got out of the car He was destroyed. The man, first of all, got back to the pit lane. He could not get out of the car. He literally couldn't move his shoulders. His shoulders seized up from the aches. He had to get helped out of the car. And then when he did, I think as far as I remember, they had to massage his shoulders in the car. Now I don't think it doesn't actually show much of that on the Netflix series about him. By the way, you should see that movie Senna. It doesn't show it, but as far as I remember, they had to massage the shoulders to relax him so he could get out of the car again. When he finally did, he's on the podium, and you can YouTube this as well, guys. He was on the podium, and he received the trophy, the cup, for winning. He could not lift the cup over his shoulders properly. He got it up for about a half a second, and he dropped it because he couldn't physically hold the cup up. Now, guys, I know from racing, I've won cars and karts. I've got the trophy, right? I've won a lot of trophies over my years. And you know something? I can tell you this: they're not heavy. Okay, like the biggest trophy and heaviest trophy I've ever received was, I don't know, a kilo. Okay, it was nothing. Maybe not even a kilo, but it was nothing. Okay, you don't need two hands. Now, most people do because it's just easier, just hold up with two hands, but you don't need the two hands. And this man could barely hold the thing. I'll put it this way, guys. It might be like 2 bags of sugar that he was holding up. Okay? 2 bags of sugar. And guys, if there's any lesson that you can learn from Ayrton Senna in any career that you do, and I think, is it Vince Lombardi, the American NFL coach back in the day? He's known as the greatest F1, the greatest American football coach of all time. I think, don't quote me, but I think he said the greatest achievement man has is lying exhausted on the battlefield. I'm pretty close on that. And guys, like, I genuinely wish I had a race where I was that exhausted. Now, I don't know if this is the kind of the racing driver mentality, but I really do. I really wish that I had a race like that where it took everything out of me. It was unbelievable. I mean, and not just that, guys. Even in outside his racing career, he set up the Senna Foundation Brazil, which is still going strong, by the way. And guys, this is like when he died, I think it was 94 or 95. I'll never forget that day. I was actually karting in Mondello in Dublin. I was a kid, and I found out, and I just broke down crying. I can't even watch the Senna documentary because it's too much for me. It's too emotional. It genuinely is. I think I've seen it 3 times in my life, and the first time I ever saw it in the cinema, and came out bawling, crying. The second, third time, I actually watched it at home, and I actually needed to drink. Like, I just was in one of those really emotional moments, and I think of Senna. The guy, he cared for charities. He had the Senna Foundation. The charity's still going to this day, where kids come in, and the foundation is there for kids. I mean, the guy was... Ayrton Senna is a 3-time world champion. Ayrton Senna was dirty at times. Yes, he was. Ayrton Senna was the most emotional driver the world's ever seen. Ayrton Senna was a poet when he spoke. And guys, if you've never ever heard of him before, you may have heard of him, but if you don't know much about him, I can tell you this. If you go onto YouTube right now, and look, we're all guilty of this. We sit there, watch YouTube, and we do this and that and whatever, right? You start watching videos of interviews or his races, his best races, qualifying, etc. You watch some of the stuff that he's done in his life. you'll probably side with me, and maybe not. Maybe it takes a race driver to know the race driver, but there is no one in the modern era that even comes fucking close. Now, it is a lot harder to judge how good a guy is these days because the technology is so advanced, but you can definitely see it. It creeps in every now and then, right? Like I was even speaking about Lewis Hamilton. Lewis Hamilton was, I think it was 3 years ago in Germany, Hockenheim, and he had a really bad weekend. This is the difference between Senna and Hamilton and Schumacher, right? Because Senna and Schumacher will be the same, and Fangio. This is the difference between the greats. Lewis Hamilton was leading the championship. Then he goes to Germany, Hockenheim. He has a disastrous race. He ends up being in 10th position in the race, right? He's in 10th, so the race is not over yet. He's in 10th. Now, if you finish 10th, you get 1 championship point, right? And you need every single point possible, because at the end of the year, if you win the championship, it could be over that 1 single point. So finishing 10th, it sucks, especially for, Hamilton was winning everything, okay? But you got to take your medicine, live in the shit, and go with it, because every great driver like Senna and Schumacher, they would have went, Jesus Christ, I'll get something out of this weekend at least, that 1 championship point. Those guys, Fangio, Schumacher, Senna, they would have never, ever have given up for that point, because they know at the end of the day, it can always come down to even 1 point. And so many championships have over the years, so many. And what did Lewis Hamilton do? He radioed into the team while he was in 10th position, and he says, retire the car. He wanted to fucking give up. Now, if there's any Lewis Hamilton fans out there, by the way, I'm sorry to burst your bubble. And by the way, I'm very fair when it comes to drivers. I love Hamilton's balls. He's dramatic, right? He'll go for gaps. Okay? Like, he won't back down. I love his fighting spirit. He's just not that good, guys. He's just not that good. I'm sorry if there are Hamilton fans out there, but that's just the way it is. He's no Hamilton. He's no Senna. He's no Schumacher. I can fucking tell you that for a fact. And you ask anybody in the racing world, forget Sky, forget all those broadcasters and their biased bullshit for their own, okay? You ask anybody properly, they'll tell you. And guys, Ayrton Senna would have bled for that championship point. He would have done anything possible. I'll leave you with this. I have never seen another Formula 1 driver watch another Formula 1 driver qualify. In other words, Gerhard Berger was his teammate back in the day. And I think and they were in a qualifying session. So Senna was out on the track. Gerhard Berger, his teammate at the time, had, I think he'd car problems. Okay, so he was stuck in the pit lane, couldn't get back out, and all of a sudden, he's watching how the qualifying's ending up. So he's watching Senna, and Senna goes out, does an unbelievable lap time, and Gerhard Berger, and hopefully you can find this on YouTube, the camera's on Berger watching, and Berger just went, whoa! Like, screamed it out. Right? I have never seen a Formula 1, a racing driver ever scream out the way he did. That just sums up Ayrton Senna in one, that he could make another driver do that, because you know what, guys? A racing driver doesn't want to show that. They don't want to show that they were blown away by his competition, because even though they're teammates, they're still fucking competitors at the end of the day. The last thing you want is the camera to see you do that, because that might look like, oh my God, he's got to me. And Gerhard Berger, it was just such a natural thing. So guys, thanks for listening. Ayrton Senna. Look him up on YouTube. Watch his documentary on Netflix. It's just called Senna. Now, I think it should still be available, but you'll find it, guys. You'll find it. And definitely you can watch a lot of his qualifying, his racing on YouTube, behind the scenes. Another good one actually is when Jackie Stewart, by the way, 3-time world champion, one of the greats of all time, Jackie Stewart, he's interviewing Ayrton Senna, and Ayrton Senna just puts him in his box. He actually makes Jackie Stewart look like a fucking rookie of Formula 1. So YouTube, Jackie Stewart, Ayrton Senna interview. you'll just see the charisma, the God-given talent of this man, the poet that we know of him. So, yeah, guys, thanks for listening. Ayrton Senna, check him out on YouTube, and hopefully the documentary's still on Netflix for you, and just look it up, Senna. Cheers, guys.